Hello, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my repeat D&C story. I did have to get a second one because I had a lot of complications from my first one. If you haven't seen that story, I will go ahead and leave that one linked down below. But after the first one, I had a lot of bleeding, bleeding that was not supposed to happen according to my doctors. They said I would be healed within a weekend, and it took 6 weeks before the issue finally got addressed and figured out. So I'm going to go ahead and start immediately after my D&C, the first one. About 4 days after my first D&C, I noticed that I passed a blood clot. I did not say anything at the time. I didn't feel like it was anything to really worry about. I figured that because I had been doing a lot immediately after surgery, picking up my other children, going and doing stuff for their schooling, and just going more than normal on that particular week, I thought, okay, this is nothing. Bleeding happens when you go a lot, and especially after having just had surgery a few days prior. So I wasn't worried there. 3 days later, I passed multiple blood clots, and I passed multiple blood clots throughout the night. I finally told my husband about it. I was told to go to the emergency room. I kept passing clots that whole night. They did a second ultrasound there in the middle of the night, and they told me that there was stuff that they saw, but they didn't think there was too much of it. I did end up requesting to speak with someone from OB. She told me she wasn't worried about it, but if I needed to have a second D&C, I could have one by the end of that weekend. However, I did not have that. I ended up taking the Cytotec pill, which I chose not to do that before my first D&C because I didn't want my body to do anything before I got to have the surgery. I took that the following day. It didn't do anything for me. All it did was make me feel really bad for a few hours, and then I felt fine, as fine as I could have been during that time. But after that, the bleeding kind of started to let up, and then for about a month it would let up. It would come back heavy, it would let up again. I think I would be almost done bleeding, and then I would start all over again. About 3 weeks before my second D&C, I noticed an increase in blood flow all over again. And at that time, I decided that I'm like, you know what, I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to see if anything comes of it, and just kind of see where I was. By that point, I had already not been feeling good. I hadn't been feeling good for a few weeks at that point. The hormonal imbalance was just very off. I felt very drained and worn out during this whole process. And we had gone to a couple birthday parties, and a couple of the ladies at both those birthday parties, there were back-to-back parties for the kids' friends. 2 weekends in a row, and both times they told me that I did not look like I was feeling too good. I didn't feel too great, and the reality is I wasn't. I also contribute that to also grieving because of our pregnancy loss, so there have been multiple things at play. But at the most recent, the second birthday party we went to, on our way there, that's when I noticed the increase in blood flow, and that's when I said I'm just going to watch it. Well, another week later, I was still bleeding heavy. There was a lot of fresh blood. None of it was old. The entire 6 weeks from the first to the second D&C, there was a whole lot of blood flow that did not ease up or go away. Occasionally it would let up for a few days, and then it would start all over again. And that was pretty much our cycle. Anyway, I got to that second birthday party, decided to watch that, and then about a week later, I noticed another surge of blood. Again, didn't really think too much of it, decided I was going to watch it. But then one morning I woke up in a pool of blood, more than what I had been experiencing previously, even though I'd already known it was heavy. I woke up just out of a dead sleep, just kind of blood everywhere. So I went to go check it out. Again, looked more than normal, but decided to just keep an eye on it, knowing at that point, I had known about a week earlier at that birthday party that something was really wrong. But I got to that point where I woke up with that in that pool of blood, and that's when I really knew something was wrong. But again, I decided I didn't want to worry too much about it. I had been in contact with my doctors. They just kept telling me to keep an eye on it. And again, this lasted throughout this whole process. Later that day, after I woke up in that pool of blood, I started clotting again. There was flush, like there was a whole another spurt of clots. And that's when I called my doctor. I was supposed to see them 2 weeks later for a post-op. But after I'd called them, that day after that clot, that happened later in the evening, they said, we don't want you to wait any longer. We want you to come on in. We need to see what's going on, because now that you're clotting all over again, this is actually very serious. So I went in the next day to my OB, and they took an ultrasound there, and they said, okay, there's something definitely there. We know that your overall health is fine. Like, my biggest concern was being able to have more babies. I don't want my reproductive health to be an issue, and they told me right off the bat, we're not worried about your reproductive health, but there's something wrong. We need to get another ultrasound to see what's really going on. And so I did that the following day, or yeah, I was able to do that by the end of that week. By that point, my doctor had already seen what was going on. He just needed to have it confirmed. And he had scheduled surgery about a week later. So I got the ultrasound, which confirmed that there was something wrong. They couldn't really tell what it was. All they knew was that there was stuff there from the first D&C that he didn't believe he quite got. About 6 days after that ultrasound, I did get my second D&C, which was actually a lot more invasive than the first one. They had to do a few more tricks. I'm not entirely sure what had happened, but I know that they just had to do some more stuff in there. So the following week, I ended up getting the pathology report, and they told me that there were products of conception, was how they worded it, left from the previous D&C. And so I questioned them, like, okay, is that like leftover baby parts? Is that leftover placenta? They didn't really want to answer me at first, but then they told me that they're like, yes, this is exactly what we're seeing. This is exactly what this means. And at that point, I kind of broke down, which would explain the way that I had been feeling for the last 6 weeks. I remember feeling like in a state of crazy. Like I remember like just the whole 6 weeks timeline of it. I would feel good one day, and I would feel like I had completely gone crazy the next day. And it was even like by the day, it was like by the moment almost. I felt like I had gone crazy, like something was seriously wrong with me. And so that whole time I'm like, okay, well, I'm also grieving. I'm also in a postpartum season. I'm also dealing with the repercussions of the D&C and the complications. I was in the emergency room multiple times throughout this whole process, either emergency rooms or emergency doctor's appointments. I don't really fault my doctor so much as I think it was just the way my body reacted to this. So actually my doctors have been really good with me through this whole process. I did have to advocate for myself, but I think that's just one of those things that you have to advocate for yourself in any kind of a medical situation. Well, in anything in life, you need to advocate for yourself no matter where you're at, but especially in a medical situation where your doctors are there to do a job, but you need to make sure that you're advocating for what your wants are and what your needs are and what you suspect is going on. So it did take a lot of that on my part. But once my doctor got in, he realized, okay, something was seriously wrong. We needed to get this taken care of. And he saw that there was leftover stuff that did come out. And I think a lot of it has to do with, like, when I did my first D&C, I refused to take the Cytotec pill, which he did advise me to take to help move things along, to make the D&C easier. I refused that. Quite honestly, I was just scared. So I think because he had to start from square one and basically do everything for my body because it wasn't doing anything on its own to naturally miscarry, he had to go in there, and there was a lot to get out. and he just couldn't get all of it the first time. So again, I don't fault him so much, as I feel like that's just kind of what happened, plus the way my body reacted to post D&C. But it really, like, my mental health took a hit. And because I had been bleeding for 6 to 8 weeks non-stop, I feel like that affects my physical health. Like, I had friends, I had family, I had everyone around me. My husband was telling me, it's like, you don't look good. Your color is drained from your face. You look like you're exhausted. And quite honestly, I felt like I was on the verge of collapse at any moment. I felt like at any point in time, I would just, like, be done and couldn't do anymore, and like full on, like, I felt like I was in collapse mode, and everybody around me saw it. Everyone around me saw that I was not okay. And it was more than just grieving. I had been told from other people in my life, they're like, you're also grieving, you're also in a postpartum season, like, do not think your body is healed up yet just because you had this first procedure. You have more healing to go, whether you think you're there or not. And they could not have been more right. I mean, and these are people in my life who are fully supportive. Some of them have been through it. I mean, I've been, like, no lack of support in my life. I've had so many people come alongside me in this season and just walk with me and be able to give me information with what they had, knowing where I was at in each step of this whole process. So I've had wonderful, wonderful people come into my life, or the wonderful people that are in my life come in and say, these things need to be addressed. It's okay to feel like this. It's normal to feel like this. But because of certain things that you are experiencing, you do need to go back to your doctors and make sure that they are taking care of this situation, because this is not normal. Bleeding for 6 weeks after a D&C is not normal. It didn't take me that long after each postpartum season with each of my 4 healthy children to, I didn't bleed near as long as this. And with everybody there kind of saying, like, all the confirmation, the Lord looking out for me, bringing people in my life, and then people in my life saying, you look just in no mean way possible, but in just a very loving, like, you need to get this situated because you do not look like you are healthy right now. You do not look like you are okay, and, like, in the best, most loving, helpful way possible. So I ended up getting that second D&C, same hospital procedures as the first time. This time, though, I woke up in pain from the, like, last D&C I had. I wasn't in too much pain, but this time I immediately woke up from the anesthesia. I was in a lot of pain, and I kept begging for pain meds. I was, like, just crying out, saying, give me something, please give me something. So they ended up giving me some stuff, some pain medication while I was still in the recovery room. So that was nice. That kind of eased the pain for the rest of the day. And then throughout the course of that weekend, I gradually started feeling better. I was very, very sore for about 2 weeks now. I am now 2.5 weeks post-op. So the first 2 weeks I was very sore, especially that first weekend there. But I will say this. Immediately after that second D&C, I felt a sense of intense relief. I felt like the hormonal stuff wasn't there anymore. Like, I felt like I got a breath of fresh air. Like, I felt like there was this weight on me that was just lifted that I didn't know needed to be lifted. And that whole day, like, I mean, I just had surgery, so I was a little bit out of it. It was kind of funny, like, just the whole day itself was just kind of like, there was a lot of laughter and a lot of joy. And for me, at that point, I felt like it had been so long since we've just kind of had this kind of laughter. I mean, some of it was from just recovering from surgery, but then a lot of it was like I genuinely felt better. Like, physically, I was sore for a while, but hormonally, I felt this huge heavy weight just lifted off me. And like that whole weekend, I felt this weight and this joy come back into my life, and like the hormonal imbalance of what was inside of me waiting to come out for 6 weeks, it was just not there. And it was just, again, a weight that I didn't know was there that lifted. So that part itself was like, okay, this, like, I knew at that point that this surgery was absolutely necessary to have the second one. And like immediately, we had done my daughter's first birthday party a couple days later. Of course, my family all helped me out, my friends all helped me out, so I really didn't have to do much at that point. And quite honestly, I was feeling well enough to be up and doing things and like doing small things. Like I was able to be out and enjoy, we just a very small birthday party with family and a couple friends. But I was able to go and do those things as long as I was sitting down, as long as I wasn't lifting anything heavy. Unfortunately, I was not able to lift my children for that weekend. Really, I did minimal lifting as much as I was able to for about 2 weeks. I mean, I've got kids, I need to be able to do stuff with them, but especially that first 2 to 3 days there, I didn't do hardly anything. But immediately, like just 2 days after my surgery, my friends, my family, they were all telling me, like, you have color back to your face. You look like you're feeling better. You look like you're healing up. And this is the first time we've seen you do this in, at this point, months, because I had been pregnant before, dealing with pregnancy symptoms and then the miscarriage and those symptoms and the symptoms from the first D&C. So it had been a long time. For the first time, like, I felt like a weight had been lifted. I had looked better. I was feeling better. Again, still sore. So I did real good for about 6 days from the procedure to the following week. By day 6, I had some breakthrough bleeding again, and I'd come home, I was taking care of the kids, and immediately there was, like, I just felt a gush of blood come out, and I'm like, okay, not again, like, oh no, like, we had been doing so good. I had been feeling good that week. I mean, like, and that was the day that I got the pathology report back, and it literally broke me. Thankfully, I was around some amazing people in my life who were able to hold me when I got the news and support me and pray for me and love on me as I got that news. So that was good. But later that day, that's when the breakthrough bleeding, and I called my husband, and I'm like, okay, babe, like, here we go. And he told me, well, again, you've been doing things you shouldn't, you've been going again. You've been taking care of everybody and things and doing the routine. Maybe you need to just ease up and take a break. And so I was bleeding for about 4 days. So from day 6 post-op to day 10 post-op, I think. Yeah, day 10 post-op. And then I was at church a little over a week later. And I was just doing what we do on Sundays at church, and I'd gone to the bathroom, like, I had felt something come out of me, like, at that point I thought it was a clot. I'm like, okay, here we go again, call my doctors, get prepared. And I'd gone to the bathroom to check, and I'm like, nothing's there. And it felt way, like, I had gotten accustomed to knowing what the clots felt like coming out, and this felt worse than a clot. And so I'd gone to the bathroom, I'm like, and didn't see anything. I'm like, okay, it probably needs another minute. I waited like another 5 to 10 minutes. Then I felt it like come fully out, and I went to go check, and it was about the size of a quarter chunk of just pure flesh. It was thick, it was hard, it was gray, it was flesh. And so I called my husband to come look at it, and he's like, you need to call your doctor right away. And at that point, we were very concerned. So I called them. Again, thankfully, like, my parents were at church, our pastor was there, like, they were able to help with the kids and stuff, and again, support me through that. So I wasn't alone when I was going through that, thankfully. I had called my doctors. They said, we're not worried about it. Like, we were at that point, we're like, okay, here's another emergency room visit, let's just get prepared. And they called me and they said, well, it's nothing I'm concerned about. It's known to happen sometimes. My husband had looked up on the internet, which, don't Google anything, but at that point he had looked up saying that this is actually, it's rare, but it does happen from time to time. Sometimes the flesh will come out as the body's healing, and we're like, okay, well, the symptoms line up. So at that point, I was like, okay, let's just wait and see. My doctor told me, just wait and see, if it gets to be much bigger than that, come in. But at this point, based on what you're describing, we are not concerned. So we're like, okay. So for the rest of the day at that point, like, that would explain, but the bleeding from like 4 days earlier, that would explain all of that bleeding. And then I was actually in a lot of pain right before the incident happened. And even like Tylenol, ibuprofen, none of that helped. Like, painkillers weren't helping, so that was a red flag. And that's, of course, when I called, waiting to hear from my doctor, they were like, yeah, this is, the fact that you're in pain is concerning, but my doctors, ultimately, when I got a phone call about an hour and a half later from them, they weren't concerned. But I was very, very sore like the couple days leading up to that that clot of flesh, up until the rest of the afternoon, I was very sore. So I passed it. That afternoon, I was just very sore. Like my body was just kind of sore. Like I knew I passed something that kind of hurt. And so by that point, it was like, okay, let's just go home and rest. Like let my body just rest for the evening. So there was a lot more pain than I kind of would think something like that would have hurt. Again, I've given birth before, so for me it was, I didn't expect that kind of pain, and it wasn't nothing like I didn't feel like I'd given birth. I didn't feel like anything. I felt genuinely just kind of sore. Again, a week earlier I had just had surgery. My body was still recovering from that, and then I passed this chunk of flesh. My body now had to recover from that. And so I came home and I just rested for the rest of the afternoon. I woke up the next day, a couple hours into my day, I passed another chunk of flesh. And so I called my husband again. I'm like, okay, at this point, I'm really not concerned. It's small enough that my doctors told me not to worry about it. So, but I was still kind of bleeding a little bit. And I passed that second chunk of flesh. It was a little bit smaller than the first one, but it was still pure flesh. So at that point, I'm like, okay, again, I'm just going to watch it. I'm going to, my post-op appointment was coming up in a few days. I wasn't too worried about it. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to really keep an eye on my body at this point, which we had been doing for this whole time because of the last couple of months just been going through what we've been going through. And so after I passed that, that's when I started to feel better. Like that second one was not painful at all. By that morning, I'd been feeling better from the day before. And immediately the bleeding had stopped, the pain had stopped, and I did not feel like when I was bleeding that second time up until after I passed the clots, I wasn't feeling the hormonal up and down that I had been feeling when I was passing blood clots. So that was a huge plus. So I am thankful that that did not take effect, because if I would have been feeling like that, I probably would have been a little bit more concerned. But because I wasn't feeling the hormonal shift that I had been feeling with the blood clots, I had been feeling, I wasn't as concerned, especially after talking to my doctors. So that afternoon, immediately, like I wasn't cramping anymore, I wasn't bleeding anymore. I mean, just some leftover residual stuff, which again, I wasn't worried about. And it was like, that was like the last thing that needed to happen for my body to fully heal. And I've been fine ever since. I am now a little over a week past that incident. And I've been fine ever since. There was a day, a couple days later, where I did have some breakthrough bleeding, but again, I had been going a lot that day. I'd been like doing more than normal, so I wasn't surprised by it, and I wasn't concerned because it was just a little bit. But at that point, that was just me overexerting myself and needing to rest. But at this point, I'm about a little over a week since that whole incident, and I have been feeling really good ever since. As of the day I'm filming this, 2 days ago, I got the all clear from my doctor. I had my post-op visit. He said everything looks good, you're not bleeding anymore, and he gave me the all clear to get pregnant if I wanted to. He said, if you decide to get pregnant again, you are clear to do so if that's the choice. And at this point, we do want to give my body more time to heal. My husband and I have had the conversations about what things look like going forward, and at this point in time, we feel like it's better to just let my body rest for a little while before thinking about what that looks like. But I have gotten a clean bill of health. This has been like the first time I felt so good in months, and for the first time, I just like we're not having any complications. This is the longest I've gone without having any sort of complications, and like it's like a breath of fresh air. And I mean, like emotionally, like going through this miscarriage, there's still a lot of things like emotionally that I feel like are still kind of there. Like it hits me at random times. It's not necessarily too bad, but I do, like, I'll start to think about, oh, I'd be at this stage in my pregnancy, and as of right now, I would be finding out whether we'd be having a girl or a boy around this time. So emotionally, there's still some hard parts, but I'm getting through it. I do cry still quite often. It does break my heart a little bit, but at least at this point, I've gotten a clean bill of health, and we can look at what that looks like going forward, as well as dealing with the rest of the emotional kind of whatever's going to be there. Again, I don't know what the rest of that looks like. We've been dealing with physical for a while. And again, I'll go back to, I'm very thankful for the physical, because I feel like because I was been going through it physically, it gave me emotional, like, permission to emotionally go through it. Not that I need the physical for it to go through it emotional, but I think it just added a layer of peace, even though it was hard to get through and it was a lot to go through, and my body did take a hit, my health did take a hit for it. I'm thankful that I did go through that, because of the way it's, like, because of the emotional side of it too. I don't know, it's like a really weird, like, I'm thankful at this point. Truly am thankful, because it helped me emotionally, like, because I physically had something to look at. Not that it was easy, I would emotionally, like, it gave me permission to still emotionally go through the hard parts. And though now I still have some of the emotional stuff to go through, I'm at peace with this whole scenario. Again, as awful as it was, I'm very much at peace with what happened and what I had gone through. And quite honestly, if I'm choosing between me and my family, or me and somebody else going through something like this, I'll choose me every time. I would not recommend going through it. I do not want other people to go through it, but I am thankful that I have been able to go through it, and in this way, again, as hard as it was, the Lord's looking out in all ways, emotionally, physically, and I have a clean bill of health. So it's emotional in a good way to be healthy again, to know that I'm healthy again, to be feeling better. It's emotional, but I'm so glad. Happy tears that I do have a clean bill of health, because again, it's been so long since I felt good and healthy. But also, like, I can't believe I'm on the other side of this now. And again, I still have the emotional side to go through, and I don't know what that looks like going forward. I do know that I'm not where I was at the beginning of all of this, but I do still cry, and I cry often still. I am still heartbroken over that loss, but I know that that child is with the Lord, and he or she would not choose to come back if he or she could, and to trust the Lord with whatever plans he has for our family in the future, and to know that this baby will always have a place in our lives and in our hearts, and that baby is still very much a part of our family according to our children. And again, if you are going through this, or going through miscarriage, pregnancy loss of a child at any stage, and I am so very, very sorry for that loss. This has not been easy. And again, we had ours early on, and I can't imagine what someone has to go through this later. And if you have gone through a D&C, I don't know if this video is going to help or scare you, but I did want to share my experience. I'm not a doctor. I have no medical background. I wanted to share my experience, to let you know that this can happen. And I don't think it happens to everybody, but it can happen, and this has just been my experience. But again, I'm so very sorry for your loss, and I hope this video can help you wherever you are, or at least give you some additional information if that's what you are looking for. Anyway, I will catch you in the next one. Bye for now.